"I ain't got nowhere to go, sir, but I can cook and teach your children on Christmas," she said softly. Snow fell in slow, wandering spirals over Boone Hollow, as if winter itself wished to linger and listen. Lanterns glowed along the small cluster of frontier homes, their yellow halos drifting across the snowpack like warm breaths in the cold. Aiyana Boone tightened the wool shawl around her shoulders as she stepped outside, her boots sinking softly into the whitened earth. Children hurried toward her from every direction, some laughing, some carrying toys, all of them reaching for her hands with an affection that had become as natural to them as breathing. She crouched gracefully, brushing snow from the hat of a neighbor's little boy. Her dark braids slipped forward, catching flecks of frost that shimmered like tiny beads. The child tugged her gently toward the steps, insisting she see the wooden horse he had carved. Silas Boone watched the scene from their porch, one hand resting against the railing, the other pressed against his coat where the cold bit deepest. There was something in Aiyana's presence that softened the whole neighborhood, and he wondered, again, how quickly she had become the quiet heartbeat of this place. A question rose in him, unbidden, flickering like a candle flame he tried to cup from the wind. Clara toddled out of the doorway behind him, rubbing her sleepy eyes, whispering, "Mama, Aiyana." Silas bent to lift her, but she slipped from his reach and tumbled straight into Aiyana's waiting arms. The ease of the moment struck him, the way their small family had formed without ceremony, fitting together like winter branches weaving in the wind. Yet beneath the warmth, he sensed an undercurrent moving through the hollow, subtle but cold. Not everyone embraced change so willingly. Aiyana guided the children toward the large oak stump near the well, placing Clara on her lap and helping another child mend a broken ribbon. She hummed a soft Apache tune, and though the language was older than any of their houses, it settled into the air as if it belonged. Mothers watching from doorframes paused, leaning closer, drawn by the quiet music. Even the restless wind hesitated around her, as though it too wished to understand. Silas stepped off the porch and crossed to her, boots crunching sharply in the snow. When she looked up at him, her smile carried both gratitude and a hint of uncertainty, a fragile glimmer he had begun to recognize. She never asked aloud, but he could feel it in the way her gaze brushed his. Was she truly safe here? Did she truly belong? He wished he could answer without words, wished he could lift every doubt from her shoulders the way she lifted children into safety. Curiosity stirred in him again, wondering what memories ghosted behind her soft expressions. He touched her shoulder gently, helping her rise as the children scattered to chase falling snowflakes. Clara clung to Aiyana's skirt, refusing to be put down. Silas adjusted Clara's scarf and brushed a snowflake from Aiyana's cheek. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into the warmth, a small gesture that stirred something tender in him, something that asked to grow, though he feared the world might not allow it. Their home, one among many in the tight-knit circle of the hollow, stood sturdy against the wind. Smoke threaded from neighboring chimneys. Horses shifted in nearby barns. Families carried on with the small tasks that made winter bearable. But from the corner of his eye, Silas caught a movement. Jonas Calder lingering near his gate, arms crossed, watching with a look colder than the snow itself. Jonas's gaze drifted between Aiyana and the children who adored her. He gave a stiff nod, one that meant nothing and offered nothing. Then he turned away and disappeared into his house without a word. The brief exchange left an uneasy echo behind, and Silas felt Aiyana's hand slip around Clara more protectively. He wished he could shield her from every hardened stare, but some battles rose like storms no one chose. Aiyana gently lifted Clara and walked toward their cabin, her step slow, the snow whispering around her ankles. Silas followed, listening to the faint rustle of her shawl. Inside, the fire burned low, casting warm shadows on the log walls. Clara settled quickly, curling beneath a quilt as Aiyana brushed a strand of hair from her forehead with tender familiarity. The room filled with an unspoken peace, one Silas feared could be easily shaken by the world outside. Aiyana placed her hands near the fire, letting the light warm her skin. "Does Clara sleep well in winter?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a calm that soothed more than the fire could. She sleeps better with you here, Silas admitted, surprising himself. Aiyana's eyes lifted, shimmering with something too delicate to name. It was not romance in its boldest form, but the quiet kind, born of shared tasks, shared silences, shared hope. She had brought gentleness to a house once weighed down with grief, and he sensed she did not yet fully know the extent of her gift. A gust of wind rattled the window, and the sound drew Aiyana closer to him. She looked around the room, as though memorizing each corner, each shadow, each warmth. Perhaps she feared these comforts could be taken as swiftly as they were given. Silas watched her fingers brush the edge of the table, the motion slow, thoughtful, almost hesitant. He wondered what memory her touch had summoned. After Clara drifted fully into sleep, Aiyana stepped outside once more, wanting to check on the stew she had left cooling. Silas followed, not wanting her to face the cold alone. The night had deepened, snow thickened in the lantern light, and an eerie quiet settled over the hollow. Aiyana lifted the lid of the pot resting on the porch table, steam rising into the air like a soft sigh. She moved with a kind of reverence, as though each small task held meaning. Silas admired the steadiness of her hands, the grace in her posture. He stepped beside her, offering his coat when the wind grew harsher. She shook her head at first, but when another gust swept through, she accepted it with a grateful nod. The coat, draped around her shoulders, carried more than warmth. It carried his care, though neither of them dared name it. Across the hollow, a door opened, and Maid Dawson stepped out, her skirt catching the wind. She waved with a warm smile before heading toward them, a basket in hand. "I brought tonight's bread," she announced, her voice cheerful, her breath misting in the air. "Children wouldn't settle till I promised Miss Aiyana could taste the first loaf." Aiyana accepted the basket with a soft laugh, and the sound warmed something deep in Silas. May rambled affectionately about how her own children had been following Aiyana around all day. "They say she makes the snow feel less cold," May chuckled. "I suppose I should thank you for that." The praise brought a faint blush to Aiyana's cheeks, but Silas noticed a flicker of doubt shadow the warmth. Perhaps she knew admiration could turn too easily, depending on who held the reins. Curiosity sparked again in Silas. What had her life taught her about trust? Before May could say more, footsteps approached in the snow, slow, deliberate, carrying weight. Jonas Calder appeared once again, his hat pulled low, his jaw set. He stopped a few paces from them, looking from Silas to Aiyana with a conflicted expression. "My niece," he began, then cleared his throat. "She's been asking for you. Says the doll you fixed looks better than before. She wanted me to say thank you." Aiyana smiled gently, but Jonas looked away as if ashamed of how the words tasted. He gave a stiff nod, turned, and retreated back into the shadows of his cabin. The moment hung suspended, fragile and strange, leaving Silas with more questions than answers. Aiyana watched Jonas disappear, her eyes reflecting something old and weary. Silas wished he could erase that shadow from her gaze. He stepped closer, offering silent reassurance through presence alone. She accepted it without turning. Just a faint shift of her breath told him she felt it. The wind softened. Lanterns swayed. Children peeked from frosted windows. The hollow seemed to breathe around them, waiting for something unseen. Then, faint but unmistakable, the distant sound of hooves echoed from beyond the ridge. Silas lifted his head, listening intently. Aiyana leaned into the cold air, sensing the same rise of tension. The sound grew closer, steady, purposeful, not hurried, yet not casual. Snow muffled the noise, but it still carried enough weight to stir unease. Clara whimpered inside the cabin, as though sensing the shift. Silas stepped down from the porch, narrowing his eyes as a rider emerged from the swirling snow, the silhouette tall and unmistakably official. The lantern hanging from his saddle glinted off the metal badge on his chest. Deputy Wardell Pike slowed his horse at the edge of the hollow, scanning the cluster of homes before his gaze landed on Silas and Aiyana. Silas felt his stomach tighten. Aiyana's breath caught beside him. The deputy dismounted, and in that suspended moment, the snow seemed to hold its fall, waiting to hear the words that would change the quiet night. Deputy Wardell Pike brushed snow from his coat as he approached, the lantern on his saddle casting a wavering glow across the hollow. Families peered from their doorways, half hidden behind curtains and flickering hearthlight. Aiyana stood still beside Silas, her shawl fluttering, as though it sensed the disturbance before her mind caught up. Pike's boots sank deep into the snow with each deliberate step, and for a moment, even the wind held its breath. Silas moved half an inch closer to her, not enough to provoke, just enough to promise he would not let her face anything alone. Pike's eyes swept over the hollow, pausing on the children's toys scattered in the snow, then settling on Aiyana with a look that carried more suspicion than speech. She lifted her chin with quiet dignity, though Silas felt the subtle tremor in her breath. He wished Pike had come with any message but the one he feared. "We got trouble up near the canyon," Pike said, voice low and clipped. 3 horses stolen from the Calder Ranch, and 2 more from the McAllen place. Tracks head near the old ridge trail. His gaze sharpened. Too close to Apache lands for comfort. Silas's jaw tightened. Pike hadn't accused Aiyana outright, but the implication weighed heavily in the air. Children watching from windows shrank back, as though Pike's tone had dimmed the lanterns themselves. Aiyana's hands remained steady, though the knuckles whitened around the shawl she held. Silas felt anger rise in him, slow but fierce, like heat under thick winter clay. "I assume you're here for more than bad weather reports," Silas replied evenly. Pike's expression tightened. "I'll need to search your property at dawn. Tracks scattered near this end of the hollow. Could be coincidence. Could be something else." Aiyana breathed in, soft as the falling snow. She didn't plead, didn't flinch, only faced Pike with a calm forged from years of navigating the world's harsher edges. But Silas couldn't ignore the shift in the hollow. Curtains twitched. Shadows leaned. Fear always worked faster than truth. Pike tipped his hat stiffly and stepped away into the snow, leaving silence behind like a shadow stretching across the ground. Aiyana watched him go, her expression unreadable, layered with thoughts she didn't offer to anyone yet. Silas reached for her hand, and this time she didn't hesitate. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. As Pike's silhouette disappeared, neighbors ventured out cautiously. Mae Dawson approached first, voice hushed but resolute, insisting Aiyana come warm herself by their fire if she felt unsafe. Jonas Calder followed soon after, snow clinging to his boots, apologizing for Pike's tone, though he hardly understood it himself. His niece remained tucked under his arm, waving shyly at Aiyana. The hollow was split, loyalty standing on one side, worry lingering on the other. Aiyana felt every gaze, both kind and uncertain, and Silas saw how heavily they rested on her shoulders. Inside their cabin, the fire crackled with a restless rhythm. Clara had woken, eyes wide, sensing the tension that neither adult dared give voice to. Aiyana lifted her gently, humming soft melodies until her small body relaxed. Silas watched the scene with a tightness in his chest, admiration intertwined with fear. She made everything softer, yet softness often drew the world's harshest trials. He wondered what might come of the morning, what shadows might press against the fragile walls they had built together. Aiyana tucked Clara into bed, then sat near the fire with her hands wrapped around a warm cup. Silas joined her, lowering himself slowly, choosing words with care. "You know Pike's suspicion is nonsense," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. Her voice held truth, but also an echo of something deeper, something old. But suspicion grows quickly in winter. People look for someone to blame when the world feels cold. The flames cast amber light across her face, revealing the weary strength beneath her calm. Silas longed to reach for her, to anchor her in something unshakable, but he knew comfort had to be steady, not rushed. He leaned closer instead, letting silence speak where certainty wavered. Aiyana lifted her eyes to him, and in that moment, guarded hearts inched nearer, warmed not by declarations, but by presence. Clara murmured in her sleep again, whispering Aiyana's name. The word melted the last of the doubt in Aiyana's expression, and her breath trembled with emotion she rarely let surface. Silas felt something in him settle, an understanding that what they were building wasn't fragile after all. It was simply learning to breathe in a world that demanded steel from softness. Outside, the storm thickened. Wind whistled past the cabin walls, carrying with it distant sounds, low, rhythmic, not quite natural. Silas frowned, rising halfway from his chair. Aiyana listened too, her brow furrowing with instinctive alertness. The noise grew louder, muffled by snowfall, but unmistakable, the thundering of approaching hooves. Silas moved to the window, peering through the frost. Shadows swept across the hollow, moving fast and low. These weren't lawmen. They weren't neighbors. They rode with urgency and deceit, bodies hunched over stolen saddlebags that glinted faintly in the lanterlight. The horse thieves. Before he could speak, a gunshot cracked through the stillness, shattering the quiet into jagged shards. Deputy Pike had returned early, misreading the silhouettes as an ambush. His pistol flashed again, scattering the riders toward the barns and between the homes, sending families scrambling. Children screamed as the hollow erupted into chaos. Aiyana grabbed Clara and pushed her toward the safest corner of the cabin, then stepped outside when Silas rushed after her. Snow churned under frantic hooves. Pike fired blindly, shouting orders no one could hear over the storm's howl. One thief veered toward the cluster of children who had spilled out in confusion, his face twisted with desperation. Aiyana saw him before Silas did. She moved, not recklessly but instinctively, with the kind of courage forged from love rather than pride. Her shawl unfurled behind her as she stepped into the open, arms raised to draw the thief's attention away from the children. Her voice sliced through the storm in a sharp, commanding call. The thief jerked his reins, startled by her boldness, his horse rearing for an instant that exposed his guard. Silas lunged, gripping the man's coat and dragging him from the saddle. They tumbled into the snow, the thief's weapon skidding out of reach. The other riders were quickly overtaken by neighbors roused to unexpected bravery, May clutching a pitchfork, Jonas wielding a heavy axe handle, and Pike shouting directions now that he finally understood the truth. Within minutes, the thieves were subdued, disarmed, and bound. Aiyana bent over the frightened children, checking for scrapes and wiping tears. Relief washed over the hollow, like a warm current breaking through icy waters. Jonas removed his hat, stepping forward with genuine humility. "You saved them," he said softly. "Saved all of us." His voice wavered, the old frost in him thawing. May gathered the children close, praising Aiyana with unguarded affection. Even Pike approached, shame shadowing his stern features. "I misjudged," he muttered, eyes lowered. "And I'm sorry." Aiyana nodded, accepting without bitterness. She had always lived in a world where forgiveness was more courageous than anger. Silas watched her with awe, his heart tightening with emotions he could no longer deny. The neighbors formed a circle around them, lanterns flickering through the snowfall, illuminating Aiyana as though she were the flame the hollow revolved around. Clara clung to her neck, whispering, "Mama safe," and the words soothed every raw place in Aiyana's spirit. Silas stepped beside her, wrapping his arm gently around her shoulders, grounding her in a warmth she had long been denied. The neighborhood breathed in unison, one large, grateful exhale. Snow drifted around them in luminous spirals, settling on hats and shawls and trembling hands. The thieves were taken away, the danger quelled, but something else remained. An unspoken promise rising between Silas and Aiyana like a lantern lifted against the dark. The night calmed, the storm softened, and the hollow stood still, waiting for whatever new truth tomorrow's light would reveal.